Coming up on Zenith, can we build a better battery? UCF backs up new technology. Plus, how do we get robots to act more human? Find out today on Zenith.
This program has been made possible by a grant from the UCF Office of Research and Commercialization.
The UCF Office of Research and Commercialization is committed to moving the discoveries of our faculty and students from ideas to innovation to realization. By moving research from the laboratory to the private sector, we are helping to diversify Florida's economy and helping to bring high-paying jobs to our state. This program presents some examples of our research and our efforts to transition this research to the private sector.
Welcome to another edition of Zenith. I'm your host, Ed Hyland. You know, the rush is on to find alternative energy sources, solar, wind, biodiesel. But once you produce the new energy, why store it in an old battery? With test results backed by UCF's Advanced Materials Processing and Analysis Center, or AMPACT, Planar Energy Devices says it has the technology to make traditional batteries obsolete.
Well, there are lots of batteries, and we saw a growing need for batteries for electric vehicles, for large-scale wind energy storage and solar energy storage. All require the need to store electricity efficiently, store it over long periods of time, and to store it safely. The challenge is that the traditional batteries that we use today are little chemical reactors, essentially. While we've become quite adept at making them small and efficient, the large ones that are needed for these applications aren't readily available, are not easily manufactured, and quite honestly become less safe as they get bigger. And we felt that there was an opportunity to look at a different way of making batteries. In other words, could we make them smaller and more efficient, but also make them safer at the same time for these large-scale kind of green tech applications? Traditional battery, for example, that would be used in a hybrid automobile today, has with inorganic materials, has liquids, has polymers, which are organic materials, and so there's lots of different types of materials in these batteries, and they have to cycle and charge and discharge over long periods of time and do it efficiently and over a wide variety of temperatures. So as you imagine, with all those different types of materials and different types of operating environments, the batteries tend to get stressed, they change over time. What we wanted to do was eliminate the inconsistency of all those materials, have one type of material system. So our approach is what we call solid state. In other words, we've gotten the liquids out, we've gotten the plastics out, and we have all inert materials. These are materials that are safe over wide degrees of temperatures, that can hold large amounts of energy in very small amount of space. And then put that all together in a nice package into what we call a prismatic cell or a flat battery. What we're focused on are larger cells, so you wouldn't necessarily see it in a toy. You would see it in your cell phone. So your cell phone right now, you can go for a day. If you talk a lot, you can go for a day and have to recharge it. These new fourth generation phones that you're beginning to see actually may only go for half a day or a third of a day before they need to be recharged. And with our battery technology, we can make those types of cell phones run for several days. So that would be the smaller size mark. On the larger size, clearly automotive is where we're looking at. And most of the battery technologies that you see today that are being aimed at the automotive market are far too expensive, are far too finicky. And Florida is a great example where we have the extreme heats, and batteries really do not like extreme heat environments. And so a battery for an electric vehicle rated in a normal environment is going to operate much less efficiently in Florida. And again, that's the challenge of traditional chemical batteries, and they have those limitations. And what we've worked on is materials and manufacturing technologies that eliminate that kind of variance. What we wanted to do was to bring the methodologies and principles of the semiconductor industry, in other words, the techniques that are used to make very efficient, long-lasting computer chips. We wanted to use that technology to see if we could make batteries. What we've developed is a new technique to accomplish the same objective. We can put down semiconductor quality materials, but using a different deposition or a different growth technique that doesn't require high temperature, doesn't require a vacuum. In other words, has to be done at very low vacuum environment. The battery has a cathode, an anode, and an electrolyte. And we've had to demonstrate that we can successfully make all three of those materials using our new proprietary deposition processes. And we're now at the stage where we're taking all three materials and we're constructing them into the form of a battery to show that the materials work well together. So the first phase was getting them to work by themselves, and now we're in the process of getting them to work as a system. And so one of the things that we've looked to UCF to help us on is to do this validation. In other words, we in the labs here will work on materials, we'll take measurements of those materials, but that's our word. We need outside sources that can replicate what we've done here in our labs and say that, they've been able to duplicate the same types of results that we've been able to accomplish here. And for a company of our size and stature in the marketplace, having that outside validation really is important for us to raise money and to gain credibility with our customers. We're developing first generation prototypes here in-house. Our goal is to have those in the hands of customers towards the end of this year so they can start playing with them. And playing is a good word. They try to get them to break and try to get them to do things that they weren't intended to do, and that's natural. But long term, within the next 2 years, we'll be what we call in prototype production. In other words, we'll be making the batteries on machines as opposed to having people build them the way we do it now. And those machine-built batteries will then be sent out for evaluation and test, and then go through very rigorous customer qualification cycles. Again, the resources at AMPAC at UCF allows us to do a lot of that testing in-house before the customers get to do it. So we can detect failure points on these cells before we actually turn them over to customers.
Ferris says his solid-state battery fabrication process will enable manufacturers to increase their capacity by 200 to 300% while reducing costs more than 50%. Coming up, simulation. It's the real thing. How Central Florida is fighting political headwinds to maintain its lead in the high-tech simulation industry. And we'll sit down with an expert in human behavior to discover what we can learn about video games and robots and what they can learn from us. In just a few years, the simulation industry has grown from creating playthings for computer geeks to an industry in demand by the military and medicine. The National Hub for Simulation Research is in Central Florida. The Central Florida modeling, simulation, and training industry is a nearly $3 billion business. At a briefing for community leaders in Orlando, the top man at the National Center for Simulation says our area is well positioned for the next generation of simulation efforts.
What I think is really exciting right now is what's happening at Lake Nona and what that will add to this community in Central Florida. The Medical City, which began with a decision to place the Burnham Institute there, followed shortly thereafter by a decision to build an Nemours Children's Hospital, the decision by UCF to locate its medical school there, and then now the VA deciding to put a brand new medical center there, which will include a 51,000 square foot medical modeling, simulation, and training center of excellence, the only one of its kind in the United States.
Simulation is recognized in medicine as a part of the future. Medical schools all over the country are talking about it. The thing that makes it so wonderful to be here in Orlando is that we don't just talk about it, we're doing it. So for example, the medical school has hired an assistant dean for simulation. We'll start in about a month. We have space in our building that is reserved for simulation education of our medical students and simulation research.
But what we have, others want, and it has become political.
Let's do the technology right. Let's train the people right. Let's educate the workers that will be in there. Let's help the entrepreneurs that will start the business. Let's not worry too much about what's happening in Virginia or, for heaven's sakes, Huntsville, Alabama. I mean, who cares? We're in Orlando, we're in Central Florida, we have a talent pool here, we have a great university, we have a core of industry, we have the military here, we're working together. We do our job right, then the rest will take care of itself.
Taking care of itself also means keeping the public and elected officials aware that the decades-old simulation industry in Central Florida has a lot of life left.
In any part of society that or industry that has very complex systems that cost a lot of money when they fail, then the world of simulation has great things to offer. You can do the practice, you can do the failures electronically instead of physically. So simulation offers great things. It'd be great, for example, to have some simulation about undersea drilling and how to deal with that. For example, a little bit too late for the current experience, but why not for the future?
What we have right here is the epicenter for modeling, simulation, and training in the research park extending across the high-tech corridor. Add to that Medical City and the power of that, the thousands of people that will come through that. Orlando's already the #1 location for medical conferences, and you can imagine what this will do to the future.
The simulation industry provides nearly 17,000 jobs and boasts a regional economic impact of nearly $3 billion. A key part of simulation is the human interaction with robots, avatars, and software. Making it more responsive involves making it, well, more human. UCF researcher Geeta Suthankar is working to do just that as director of the Intelligent Agents Lab.
Currently I have 8 PhD students who work with me, and the focus of the lab is really working on 2 things, software agents and robotic systems. Now the first thing, what we're trying to do is use techniques from the general areas of computer science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to empower these software systems with like a little bit of extra intelligence.
Control him now to get him out the way. And then now I'm not controlling him anymore, and he's going by himself.
And when I say an agent, really what I'm talking about, and you know, obviously there are many different contexts that people use the word agent, is a system that has essentially a perception, cognition, action loop. So it's looking around, it's making a decision, it's taking action on it, and then in the future, it goes around and does that again. So basically, what we would like to do is to build systems like this that have this perception, cognition, action loop that are somehow more intelligent. And so there are certain properties that we associate with these systems. So we would like these systems to be more autonomous, so to be able to operate by themselves for longer periods of time. We would like these systems to learn from experience, so to be able to get information from the environment and incorporate that into their thought processes, so what they do in the future changes from what they've done in the past.
Let's build on what you were, give a specific example, if you will, because
sure.
you shared some videos with me which helped me understand a little bit more about what you're doing. And we'll start with the football video, because you're talking about learning a response, and one of the things that was stressed in that is how you can take and study how players will move on a field, and you learn from that and do it enough times, you start getting a pattern down, and maybe you can pick it up from there.
Yeah, so basically in terms of application areas, agents can be used in many different systems, but absolutely our favorite application area are computer games. And so being able to develop software agents for these games that play more intelligently or have more intelligent social interaction. So if you think of these massively multiplayer online games, there are whole populations of entities out there that aren't associated with a particular person. And essentially we're looking at ways to make those more intelligent.
Based on the plays shown at the start of this video, which produces a mean of 1.6 yards per play, the system determined this to be the optimal play, which gains an average of 2.5 yards against this defense.
Now in the football case, we were interested in football because as a domain, it has a set of particular problems. So the first one being that agents have to coordinate with each other. So it's not possible for any player to get a touchdown by themselves. They always have to be thinking and considering what other members of the team are doing. And the second thing is it's an adversarial situation. So you have opponents on the field and you have to think about what they're doing as well. So basically, it makes it a very difficult planning and learning problem. So it's difficult because because essentially what these programs are doing is they're searching over a space of options. So if you think about it, the more options that you ever have to consider, the longer the search takes and the harder the problem is. And anytime you add these additional entities, your teammates and your opponents, and you get into this kind of metacognitive level of trying to have to consider what your buddy is doing and the opponent is doing and considering all your options, that really increases the number of options that you have to consider. So that's really why we chose football as the domain. So really what we're trying to do is actually produce agents that can generate good football plays, yet without having any of the knowledge of football that real live human players and coaches have. So our agents don't know anything about football really. We haven't programmed them in with the rules of the game or anything much. They have playbooks, they have examples of things that have worked in the past for them, and they get experience of trying stuff out and seeing how that works for them now. But that's all they get, and what we want to do is be able to produce the best team plays possible, and also to be able to produce new team plays online. So to change what they're doing while the game is in play, and that of course is very difficult because of the search problem. That you can't stop the game and then embark on a long search and come back to it. So that's really the focus of that work.
Now people like to think of themselves as being fairly unpredictable. Oh, I don't do the same thing over and over again.
And that's definitely true, yes.
Yet part of this involves trying to predict how people will do something on a fairly regular basis. One of those was the jaywalker incident.
Right.
And maybe you can talk about how the jaywalker is influenced by perhaps other people who are around him.
So basically, activity recognition prediction problems is an important part of the research in the lab because we think it's a key technology for making these software agents more capable. So being able to watch these humans that they're working with, understand what they're doing, anticipate them, and then to be proactive about them. Now, the thing is, so most of these models that we have of doing that are based on looking at statistical patterns of action. So what we are taking is historical data of how you've acted in the past and effectively doing kind of a frequency counting style analysis of how many times did you take this action and so on. There are more technical details than that, but that's kind of the core of it. Now the thing that makes it complicated though is the presence of other people in the environment. Almost all of the research that has been done to date really focuses on simplifying the problem by saying, we have one agent, we consider each agent individually, the agent never thinks about what anyone else in the environment is doing because that's really too complicated. So with the jaywalking, but people aren't really like that. People are always looking around thinking what other people in the environment are doing. It's a really important part of our cognitive process. In the jaywalking scenario, that there have been lots of psychology studies that have shown that when you choose to cross the street, your decision of whether to jaywalk or not is highly influenced by people in the environment. So if you see other people jaywalking, it makes you more prone to jaywalk. If you see police officers obviously in the vicinity, you're less likely to go out. And interestingly, if you see people in the environment that you feel are somehow similar to you by some demographic, you are also very likely to copy what they're doing. So we know that people act like this, but at this point, that is not taken into account in any of our computer science, machine learning models for predicting what people are going to do. So the focus of that is to be able to have a principled approach for incorporating that kind of information into our model.
Now, you were a recipient of a very prestigious award, the NSF Career Award, and so you have over $400,000 that has been put toward your work. Could you give us an idea of how it's, first how the work is going, and also kind of where you stand with that grant and what you hope to accomplish with it?
The NSF grants are really basic research. So it's not really driven toward a one particular application area. It's basic research in this area of groups and crowds and teams. So what we would like to be able to do is to augment kind of existing frameworks that take into account what other people in the environment are doing. So the two things that we believe that this will enable are, first, the more accurate prediction of people's activities. And there are a couple of reasons why this is useful. So one of them is actually looking at surveillance systems. So surveillance systems are regularly using sensor data and looking at, like, large groups of people all at once. And so what we hope to be able to do is to produce models so that you can model many people in the environment simultaneously, have them take into account what other people in the environment are doing, and use that information to refine our prediction on what they're going to do in the future.
So perhaps in crowd control, or if there's a disaster, how would someone react to an incident,
right.
terrorism?
So crowd
perhaps?
control is, and then I was going to say, in addition to surveillance systems, of course, I mentioned game simulations are an important part of our research, that we're interested in building simulation and training systems for applications like crowd control. So essentially, there are current training systems for emergency responders. Actually, there's a company, ADMS, in the Orlando area that builds a system. And it's funny because in their system, they have put a lot of work into realistic models of how the fire spreads in the environment and many other things. But the people in their environment, in their current state of the simulation, just kind of walk around in a little circle or a loop. And so the research that we're doing, we hope, will be able to factor into systems like this. So you can create this group of people that's intelligent, that's moving in a way that's similar to the way people behave in the real world, which is really important in a simulation and training system, because we would like what you learn in the simulation to transfer to the real world. So if you learn in that simulation system that people walk in a loop and you ignore them, then that, it compromises your training as an emergency responder.
Does your work also involve a learning aspect, in the sense that your agents are going to pick up from other influences that you kind of throw at them? So
yes.
They
There's
will build
definitely a large component of learning from experience. In the case of our football agents, the data that they're getting is yardage on how plays have gone in the past. So they take that information and they put that in their model, they make changes, and then they try again. And one of the big challenges in learning is how to reduce the number of samples and experience that the agent has to have before it becomes smart. So having to experience the play millions or billions of time, we can do this with fast computers and so on, but we're always looking on ways that we can cut this down.
So the next time you play a video game that seems to think like you do, keep in mind the research taking place at UCF. Miss a Zenith program? Check out the archives online at www.ucf.tv and scroll down the program guide to Zenith. We'd also like to hear from you with questions or comments about this or any other program on UCF TV. My email is on our website, ehighland@mail.ucf.edu. The goal of research is to better understand the world around us. Our goal is to be a window to that world. For Zenith, I'm Ed Highland.